Hello and welcome to the FanDuel Punch-Out. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Spencer Limbach at Spencer_JL on Twitter. And it's Clayton Kershaw Day, and it's really nobody else's day. I mean, he's an enormous favorite, minus 300, depending on where you look. 6-run total against Oakland at home. Oakland already doesn't hit left-handed pitching very well at all. Clayton Kershaw, I mean, he's been pretty good over his last three starts. You look at his totals, what is it, 26 innings and 38 strikeouts, 0 walks, 14 hits. Pretty damn good.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, there really isn't anyone else to pivot down to. Usually you have someone in the 10K range, maybe 9K, but there's really no one you feel that confident in. I suppose maybe John Lackey is a reasonable favorite at home against Cincinnati, but I mean, you don't really love it. Not much upside there. Jose Quintana has been cruising lately. He had a great outing last time around. But there's a lot of risk at Boston in that hitter-friendly park. I know Boston hasn't been very good lately, but they do have right-handed power. Guys like Hanley Ramirez, Mookie Betts, Xander Bogaerts hits lefties very well. So, I mean, you're a little bit uneasy with that. I think it's a nice tournament option, but, I mean, I'm not going there for cash. I think it almost has to be Kershaw for cash, which at his price, $13,300, that kind of puts you in a predicament with the rest of your lineup. That leaves about $2,700 per position. So value plays, you're going to need a lot of them tonight if you're going with Kershaw, which is probably the preferred cash game strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite possible that he outscores everyone by quite a bit tonight, like he did the last few times. So definitely, like I said, you're going to have to be creative. So get yourself some exposure to Kershaw. If you're playing cash games, it could be a significant drop-off, so I'm with you there. That's the guy you want. Other guys you could consider for your tournament options, you mentioned how R.I. Dickey's a monster favorite against Philly, $7,500. He's pitched fairly well recently, 16.33 points last time against Oakland's. I mean, you don't love the guy. He doesn't strike out a lot of batters, but when he's pitching well, he pitches deep into games, so that could be pretty valuable around mid 7K range there. And then Lance McCullers is the other guy you could really consider at $6,700. He's got good numbers on the season. I'm facing an Angels team that, you know, they've been very inconsistent so far, but McCullers has a 25.5% strikeout rate, .39 home runs per 9, which would be among the league leaders if he qualified there. Almost 49% ground ball rate. He walks too many guys, 9.4, but really the bottom of that lineup is just so bad that, you know, even if you walk one of these big bats, there's not much chance that he's going to let him come home.
Yeah, and Mike Trout may or may not be playing tonight. If he's not, obviously you'd get a nice little boost there. And if he is, he may not be 100%. So just something to take into consideration. One more pitcher I'm looking at for tournaments is Tyson Ross. He's a name that always gets thrown out there. He's a solid pitcher, but he just hasn't had a ton of upside this year. He has a pretty good matchup against the Mets, even though San Diego, I mean, they aren't really giving any run support. I mean, you saw it last night. And that's why they are actually listed as an underdog against Bartolo Colon, who has been struggling. So Tyson Ross, risk-reward play. If San Diego can give him some run support, he might be in a fine position to put up maybe 15 fantasy points, but I'm not necessarily banking on that. So then again, more of a tournament play.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Tyson Ross, but it's really hard to get behind any of these Padres pitchers because of how bad that offense is. So definitely a guy to consider in your tournaments there. Anybody else at pitcher that you like? Because there's really nobody else that really stands out to me. I mean, you could look at a guy like Tom Kohler.
There is one.
Okay, is it Tom Kohler?
Nope, it's not Tom Kohler.
All right. Well, I think he's all right.
Chris Tillman, 6.3. He's a guy who, I mean, we've seen him go off in the past month or so. He did against Cleveland. He did the same thing at Detroit. Had 8 strikeouts, 6 strikeouts respectively in those games. He's only 6.3K against an Atlanta lineup. They have Freddie Freeman back, so that helps. But other than that, they're pretty watered down. So, I mean, you know, maybe this is, I mean, he's pretty two-faced as far as fantasy pitchers go, but at home against an uninspiring lineup, this might be a time to deploy him. Hope he can give you 15-plus fantasy points, as he's done a couple times recently. and then just stack around him in tournaments if you're building multiple lineups.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's a guy who's been better in the past. I mean, he was a good pitcher last year, just got out of the gates really slowly this year. So at his price, there's definitely some spots where you want to target hitters. So if that's the way that you're looking at, I mean, you could definitely find yourself some value with him and then get yourself some big bats because it could be a pretty high-scoring day for these lineups, and, you might need to have a cheap guy to get some exposure. So, all right, catcher. Now, Jacob Realmuto is your most expensive pitcher, or your most expensive catcher. He's actually been really good. He's only a tournament option, of course, at that price tag. I actually like the Toronto Blue Jays once again today. Obviously not facing a lefty. Yeah. I mean, it's a good spot for them today. Jerome Williams is just awful. I know you want to target them against the lefties, but, I mean, that starts with Russell Martin, $3,400. He was one of the few Jays that actually showed up last night in that weak performance by them. But you look at what he's done over his past 6 games, and the guy's been very good. So he hits righties and lefties both not equally well, but he hits righties pretty well also. So this is a team that they're probably going to be much lower owned than they were last night just because it is a righty. But they still have a 5-run team total. It was 5.5 last night, so it's still the highest on the board. And I feel like people just may not notice that because it's just auto plays against lefties. But definitely want to get yourself some exposure tonight.
Yeah, that and people are going to be trying to work Kershaw, and you can't do that with a Toronto stack. So definitely have a lower ownership percentage tonight, especially, I mean, a lot of people got burned by them last night, me included. But for catcher, I like Russell Martin and I like Brian McCann pretty much equally. McCann going up against Colby Lewis in Texas, and as we saw, it's hot in Texas and the ball's just flying out of the park. So definitely have to like McCann against a guy who has been historically bad against lefties. 350 WOBA against left-handed hitters is Colby Lewis. So I think I could kind of lean towards McCann for a cheaper salary at $3K if I'm paying up a catcher. Otherwise, if you have Clayton Kershaw, you're going to probably need someone cheaper. And in the value range, I like Matt Waiters against the Atlanta pitcher. I'm going to butcher his name, so you might as well. Okay, there you go. He said it. So he's pretty bad against lefties. Small sample size, has only pitched 33 innings, but a 424 WOBA against lefties. So Matt Waiters is a guy you kind of like better hitting from the right side of the plate, but he has proven himself a little bit so far this year since returning from injury that he can hit from the left side of the plate. So lower salary, decent matchup. Don't really mind him. Do you have anyone else you're looking at catcher?
There's no one else that really stands out. If Dioner Navarro's in against Jerome Williams, you don't mind him at min salary, but he also doesn't play a whole lot. So I think he'll be probably the punt I'll go with Kershaw if he's in the lineup because Jerome Williams is just a horrible pitcher. He's just bad.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, first base options. Jose Abreu came through in a big way last night at a discounted price. Once again, $3,400, price up just a little bit, but still in a fine spot against Rick Porcello, who's allowing a 336 WOBA to righties this year. So you got to like him. An interesting thing to look here is Mark Teixeira got hit in the foot with a pitch last night. May have just been a precaution to take him out because they were winning by about 36 runs at the time. So, if he's in the lineup, you got to like him. Maybe he gets a day off, and then that provides you with some value. You could play a guy like Garrett Jones at min salary against Colby Lewis, gets you some cheap lefty exposure to him. So if Teixeira sits, I think Garrett Jones, if you're not paying for Abreu, is probably the guy I'll go with Kershaw because you're going to have salary to save. And when we get to second base, you'll realize what we mean.
Yeah, Garrett Jones, he's one of those guys that usually flies under the radar, and he has home run upside, so you like a guy like that for minimum salary. If you're trying to get Kershaw, maybe he can kind of give you a boost there. Otherwise, Adam LaRoche is also minimum salary going against Rick Porcello, who has been historically worse against lefties. I know LaRoche hasn't done much lately, but he gets a nice little park upgrade in Fenway against a pitcher who has been struggling over the past few months. So not a horrible spot for a tournament, but I agree with you that Jose Abreu is the safe cash game play that you want to work in. Not a very prohibitive price at 3.4K. I think you can target him and feel really good about it. Otherwise, if you're paying down at pitcher, Edwin Encarnacion is probably the top overall first base. I mean, he's obviously not the top per dollar play, as I'd like to say, at 4.6K, but Encarnacion actually hits righties better than lefties over the past 3 seasons. So, righty-righty matchup with Jerome Williams in Toronto, you got to kind of like that. You don't love the price point, so obviously you're going to have to get a cheaper pitcher to work him in, but just don't forget about him entirely.
Yeah, and same goes for Chris Davis. Hit 2 homers again last
Yes,
night. You
very
already
good call.
mentioned Fulton Witz, his struggles with lefties, so get yourself some Chris Davis as well. Second base options, you want to pay up, but once again, going to be tough with Kershaw. So D. Gordon, probably the guy that I prefer to pay for today against Washington, and Doug Fister. Um, Gordon just 1 game removed from his injury. He's back. Obviously, he's healthy. Fister's actually been pretty good against lefties. 296 will be allowed, but all that D. Gordon needs to do is get on base, and he should be able to run wild against Wilson Ramos and company. So I like him quite a bit at that price tag. Other guys, I mean, Rougned Odor is the guy you usually like to play in tournaments, but he struggled his last 2 games. Now he gets Tanaka, who was pitched pretty well. He's a great tournament option because I think he'll be really low owned in that good environment there. But then when you need cheap guys, that's where it gets tough. Brandon Phillips at 2.5K and Jimmy Paredes at 2.6 are probably the guys you're looking at as your cheap options.
Yeah, I like D. Gordon, as you mentioned, if you're paying up at second base. Otherwise, I'm debating between him and Colton Wong. Wong has a nice, decent matchup against DeSclafani. Did I say that well?
Yep, you did.
Okay. All right, good. He has a 352 WOBA against left-handed hitters, so Colton Wong in a pretty decent position. We know he has upside, stolen base, and home run there. So otherwise, pivoting down, maybe Cesar Hernandez, but you just don't know how he's going to react to the knuckleball, so that's kind of a risk. All the Phillies are risks tonight. It might be worth it to build a Philly stack in a tournament and kind of go there just in case Dickey's throwing meatballs and not knuckleballs tonight. But otherwise, like you said, I think Jimmy Paredes is the guy I will go with. Likely batting second against that Atlanta pitcher that I can't pronounce his name.
Blitz.
Okay. Yeah, but batting second, 2.6K, I think he has reasonable upside in that ballpark too. So not a bad pick there. Otherwise, we were talking before the show, Johnny Giavotella has been hitting. He's only 2.3K. I know it's not a great matchup against McCullers, but if you need someone a little cheaper, I don't think there's much of a difference between him and Paredes that you'll feel bad about it if you love the rest of your lineup and you just need a filler there.
Yeah, I completely agree there. That $300 might actually go a long way in tonight's slate with Kershaw. So, third base options, Josh Donaldson kills lefties. He's also very good against righties, and Jerome Williams is not good against righties. 409 will allowed in 14 home runs already this season. So, Josh Donaldson, if you ask me, still your top play tonight. Not quite so much of a must play in cash games like he was last night for me, but definitely a guy I want to have in some tournaments. Manny Machado, very good in righty-righty matchups. Fulton Witz has been better against righties than lefties, but Machado, I think his overall skill is going to kind of mitigate that a little bit. And then if you're paying down, I know there's one guy that you were looking at particularly.
Yeah, it's Connor Gillespie of the Angels. He has, I mean, obviously you're going to have to pay attention to when the lineups come out, see where he's hitting, but he's been pretty solid lately, and I know he batted second or third last night. I think second. Obviously, that could change if Trout comes back tonight. He'll likely fill that spot. Gillespie will bat down, but I think he's a fine punt play. He's 2.3K, hitting the ball well. Seems to be, somewhat rejuvenated in the Angels lineup. So I don't really mind that. He's really one of the only cheap picks that I see and I feel somewhat confident in tonight. I guess you could look at Solarte if he is higher in the lineup, but I just don't think there's much upside there. And there really isn't that high of a floor either. So I don't know. It's pretty tough. I think Chase Headley is another tournament pick that you're going to keep on your radar, as most of the Yankees are once again in that ballpark. So I don't know. It's tough. Obviously, you want Donaldson if you're paying down away from Kershaw, and you can find a way to get him in. But otherwise, you're looking to punt, and I think Gillespie, Headley, those type of guys are, a few to keep in mind.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. Shortstop, as always, not particularly enticing. You've got Xander Bogaerts, who we seem to talk about every day, but he just continues to produce. $2,900. Gets Jose Quintana. You mentioned how he hits lefties well. Got a great lineup spot. He's going to be probably a pretty chalky play. Johnny Peralta, right behind him, really struggling over the past week or so, but his price is indicative of that at $2,800, so you can definitely consider him. And then you still got to look at Carlos Correa because this guy has just been absolutely destroying pitching. Bit better against lefties than righties, but this guy already leads. I'm pretty sure he's leading all AL shortstops in home runs, and he has, 42 games played?
Yeah,
Like that?
okay.
So, I mean, the guy's got a ton of power. You're not going to be able to – you're not playing him in your Kershaw lineup, of course, but you want to get some of him in some tournaments tonight.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Xander Bogaerts is the best play. He might be a little more expensive than you really want at shortstop, but if you dip down, I don't really see anyone down here that you can kind of feel confident in. Just click them in and move to the next. Maybe Marwin Gonzalez if he's back towards the top of the lineup, but even he's not really that cheap. He's 2.6K, so for that I might just pay the extra $300, and feel more secure with Bogaerts.
Yeah.
That's likely what I'll be doing tonight.
I did find one more cheap guy that I had overlooked earlier. Didi Gregorius. You don't like his lineup spot, usually bats 7th or 8th, but four of his last 5 starts, he has either 2, 3, or 4 hits. So at $2,500, we mentioned the ball flying. The Yankees Stadium, he homered last night. Colby Lewis bad against lefties. Now that I'm looking more into it, I mean, if I'm not going Bogaerts and I need the extra 400, I think I really like Didi Gregorius tonight.
Yeah, that's a really good call. And as we said, Colby Lewis pretty bad against lefties. So I think that's a nice high upside pick and probably one of the better ones in that price range.
Absolutely. Looking at the outfield, I mean, there's a whole lot of injury concerns here at the top. You've got Trout, we already mentioned, may or may not play today. Of course, Stanton out. Jose Bautista left Tuesday's game with a cramp, so maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. If he doesn't play, that should open up some value on the Toronto side against Jerome Williams. Guys like Chris Colabello, who will be in the lineup anyway, but maybe you see guys like Kevin Pillar get moved up higher. So keep your eye on that because you definitely want to get cheap pieces of Toronto where you can. That might help you fill out your cash games with Kershaw. Otherwise, your outfielders that you're looking at, you want Gardner and Ellsbury, both those guys in great spot, of course, tonight. $3,700 for each one. Take your pick. Once again, always kind of a tough decision between the two. But if you can afford them, you want those guys. And then one more guy, Melky Cabrera. It's just ridiculous right now. He's got RBIs in 9 of his last 10 games. He has at least 2 doubles in 3 of his last 5 games. I mean, the guy has just been absolutely locked in. So you don't like to pay a $3,600 price tag for a guy like him, but he's been one of the best hitters in all of baseball recently.
Yeah, and it's really strange. I think he just loves to hit in Fenway Park, as weird as that is, saying that, certain guys like to hit in certain parts. You can say what you want about it, but he's just mashing the ball. And I remember he did the same last year in Fenway as a Blue Jay. But yeah, 4 for 5 last night. It's ridiculous to think that he's 3.6K, but it's well-deserved, actually. He should probably be more than that. If you remember the first few months of the season, he was bare minimum, and even then you weren't touching him with a 10-foot pole. But, yeah, I like Melky Cabrera. Obviously, Ellsbury and Gardner. I think I might lean towards Ellsbury of the two of the same price, but certainly don't dislike Gardner by any means as well. Otherwise, if you need someone cheaper, as you will if you're going with Kershaw, their teammate Carlos Beltran is 2.5K, another way to get some cheap exposure to the Yankees, and you'll probably want to do that tonight. Otherwise, minimum salary, Will Venable, likely leading off against a struggling Bartolo Colon. You don't love the play, but you don't really love anyone else sitting at minimum salary in the outfield. So kind of, if you need him, you can put him in as a filler and feel okay about it. Otherwise, Garcia of the White Sox is 2.3K, and the White Sox have been having a great series in Boston. And Garcia, he hasn't had a ton of upside, but he's been steady, and that's all you really want at 2.3K, facing a struggling Rick Porcello tonight. So I don't really mind that pick. He's probably a little better of a pick than Will Venable, in my opinion. But those are three cheap guys that I'm targeting tonight.
Yeah, I'll throw out one more. Marlon Byrd at $2,300. Righty against John Lackey, who, as we know, is a good pitcher. Only 285 will allow to righties, but Marlon Byrd, last 3 games has struggled, but over the past month, been probably the best hitter outside of Joey Votto for the Reds. And he actually has a decent amount of success against John Lackey. If you're the BVP believers, 10 for 29 with a couple home runs and 4 extra base hits. So near min salary, he's one of the better talent-wise hitters down there. So I don't mind going that route either.
Yep.
All right. And that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.